All right, welcome in everyone. We're diving deep today. And this time, you've brought us a really fascinating piece, a comprehensive guide to Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now.
Yeah.
So listener, think of this as your express lane to really grasping the core ideas of the power of now and, hopefully finding a little more peace and a little less stress in your daily life. And no worries, we're going to make sure it all makes sense, even if you're not familiar with the more philosophical side of things.
Exactly. And what's so great about this book, and this guide really captures it well, is how it speaks to those challenges we all face. I mean, who hasn't felt that constant hum of anxiety?
Right.
Or the overthinking, just, thoughts spinning in circles, or even just wanting deeper connections, more clarity, that inner peace we hear so much about. And let's not forget, just being more focused and productive too, right?
Absolutely. So this guide we've got, it starts by talking about what it calls the root of suffering. And the main idea here is that a lot of our pain comes from getting totally caught up in our thoughts. Like we become our thoughts.
Yeah, that's Tolle's big thing. He's saying we identify so strongly with our thoughts that we get completely swept away by them. It's like the guide uses this great example. Imagine you're at work just waiting for an email and boom, this negative thought pops up like, what if I don't get that promotion? Or what if my boss hates my work? And suddenly your mind's off to the races, creating this whole story of disaster, even though nothing's actually happened yet.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right. It's the story we create that causes the suffering, not the actual reality of the situation. It's a powerful concept when you start to notice how often we do that to ourselves.
Totally. So if that's the problem, this over-identification with our thinking, how do we break free? The guide actually lays out some pretty practical ways to start applying this.
It does. So step one, the key is learning to observe your thoughts without getting merged with them. Like, picture a movie screen. You see the action, the drama, but you're not actually in the movie, right? You're just watching it.
Right, that makes sense.
And then there's this watching the thinker technique I think is brilliant. The guide suggests that when a negative thought comes up, you consciously pause, take a breath, and say to yourself, I am aware of this thought, but I am not this thought.
I like that. So simple, but powerful.
Yeah, and it creates this crucial space, this gap between you and the mental chaos. A subtle shift, but it can make a huge difference.
It's like you're stepping back, becoming the observer instead of being trapped in the thought itself.
Exactly. And then the guide also mentions mindfulness practices, things we've all heard of, like focused breathing, meditation, really paying attention to your surroundings.
Right. Those seem to be everywhere these days.
And there's a reason for that. They really help anchor you in the present moment, which is what weakens that grip our thoughts have on us. And what I find so interesting is that they're so simple, but they have the potential to really change how we experience our inner world. It's not about stopping thoughts altogether, more about changing how we relate to them.
Okay, so we're looking at how our minds can create suffering when we're too attached to our thoughts, and we've got some ways to start loosening that grip. Now, the guide moves on to another big theme, and this one's a bit of a mind bender. The present moment is the only reality. That seems like a pretty radical shift for most of us who spend so much time planning for the future or dwelling on the past.
It is a shift, for sure. Tolle's basically saying that the past and the future, the way we typically experience them, are mostly mental constructs. They mostly exist in our minds. The only place where life actually happens, the only true reality, is right here, right now, this moment.
Whoa, that's deep.
It is, and it kind of challenges how we usually think about time, doesn't it?
It does. So all that energy we spend worrying about what might happen next week or replaying that embarrassing thing that happened 10 years ago, it's actually pulling us away from the only place where life is truly taking place.
Exactly. And the guide has some really interesting examples to illustrate this. Think about athletes who talk about being in the zone. That peak performance often happens when they're not thinking about past mistakes or future outcomes. They're fully immersed in the present action. Same with musicians and artists. When they're deep in their creative flow, they lose themselves in the moment. And that's often when their best work comes out.
Yeah, you hear that a lot, that feeling of total absorption, like time disappears when you're totally engaged in something. But how do we actually cultivate that present moment focus in our own lives? The guide must have some practical tips, right?
Oh, it definitely does. First off, it's simple but crucial. When you notice your mind wandering off to the past or future, just gently guide it back to the present. No judgment, just a gentle redirection.
Easy enough.
And then it suggests using grounding techniques like Consciously focusing on your breath as it goes in and out, noticing the physical sensations you're experiencing, or really observing your surroundings using all your senses. I love this next one, turning everyday activities into mindfulness exercises. Like when you're eating, really savor the taste, the textures, the smells. When you're walking, feel the movement of your body, the contact of your feet with the ground. It's about bringing awareness to those ordinary moments that make up our lives.
Yeah, that's great. It makes presence something you can practice all the time, not just something you set aside time for.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about thoughts in the present moment. Now, the guide introduces this concept of the pain body, which sounds kind of intense. What exactly is that?
Yeah, what is that all about?
It's a pretty powerful term. Tolle uses it to describe this buildup of past emotional pain that we carry around inside us. All those hurts, disappointments, anger, traumas that haven't been fully processed and released. It's like an energetic residue of past suffering.
So like emotional baggage, but almost like it has a life of its own. The guide says it feeds on negative emotions, which sounds a little scary.
It can be. The guide explains that this pain body is kind of dormant most of the time, but it can be triggered by things that remind us of past experiences or even just negative thoughts. And when it gets activated, it wants to relive that old pain or even create new pain by pushing us to react emotionally in the present.
The examples in the guide are so relatable, like someone who was constantly criticized as a kid and now overreacts to any feedback at work, even if it's constructive. Or someone who got betrayed in a past relationship and now struggles to trust anyone, even a partner who's shown they're trustworthy. It's like the past is intruding on the present.
Exactly. That's exactly how it works. So how do we deal with this pain body? The guide has some good advice. First, become aware of your triggers, those things that set off those intense emotional reactions without getting swept away by them. Notice that surge of anger or defensiveness and recognize it as a signal that the pain body might be waking up.
Okay, that makes sense. So notice it, but don't get caught up in it.
Right. And then, instead of trying to suppress or deny the pain, the guide suggests observing it with curiosity.
Yeah.
Like saying to yourself, this feeling is here. What does it feel like in my body? No judgment, just observation. And this is key. When you're hit with those overwhelming negative emotions, remind yourself, this is the pain body acting up. This is not who I am. Again, it's about creating that space, that separation.
It's empowering, recognizing the pattern and not automatically believing those emotions are your true self in that moment.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground. The guide then wraps up with the final big theme, which is acceptance and surrender as the path to inner peace. Now, this is one that people sometimes get wrong, thinking it means being passive or giving up.
Yeah, I can see how that could happen.
Right, and the guide addresses that directly, saying acceptance doesn't mean resigning yourself to a bad situation or condoning it. It's about acknowledging the present moment exactly as it is, without resistance or judgment, facing reality head on.
So it's not about saying you enjoy being stuck in traffic, but more about acknowledging that you are, in fact, stuck in traffic right now.
Exactly. The guide uses that traffic jam example. Getting all worked up only makes you suffer more. Accepting the reality of it lets you stay calm, maybe even use the time productively, like listening to a good podcast. And then there's the example of losing a job. Dwelling on the unfairness or the disappointment won't bring it back. Acceptance lets you process it, feel your feelings, and then move on to explore new opportunity.
Right. That distinction between acceptance and just giving up is really important. So how do we actually cultivate this acceptance and surrender in our lives?
Well, the guide suggests that when you face a tough situation, ask yourself, can I accept this moment as it is? It sounds simple, but that question can really shift your internal state. It also talks about knowing when to take action and when to accept. If you can change a situation, do it, but from a place of calm clarity, not resistance. But if it's something you can't control right now, acceptance is the key to freedom. It's about letting go of that need to control everything and trusting that life unfolds as it should.
I like that. It's a different way of looking at things. So these themes, they all seem so connected, like different sides of the same idea, the power of presence. Now, the guide goes on to explore how these power of now principles can actually lead to real-world success in different areas of life, starting with work and business.
And what's interesting is how this internal shift towards presence can have tangible external benefits in a work setting. The guide talks about improved focus, leading to more productivity, which makes sense. When you're not distracted, you can really concentrate on the task at hand. It also mentions reduced stress in decision-making and better leadership and communication when you're truly present in interactions with colleagues and clients.
The guide even brings up Steve Jobs, who is known for practicing mindfulness, and how that probably contributed to his incredible focus and creativity. That's a pretty big real-world example. So what about relationships? How does cultivating presence affect our connections with others?
It's huge. The guide emphasizes how presence deepens connections and makes them more genuine. When you're truly present with someone, you're really listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk or getting distracted by your own thoughts. That kind of active listening leads to more empathy and understanding. And importantly, letting go of past resentments and hurts, which goes back to the pain body, creates a foundation for healthier relationships. When you're not viewing your interactions through the lens of the past, you can be more open and receptive to the person in front of you.
The guide gives this great example of taking a few deep breaths and focusing on really listening without judgment during an argument instead of just reacting emotionally. It's about breaking those old, unhelpful patterns.
Yeah, it's about responding consciously instead of just reacting. And finally, the guide touches on personal growth and happiness, which seem like natural outcomes of all the benefits we've already talked about.
Totally. Less stress, more clarity, deeper connections, it all adds up.
It does. The guide summarizes how cultivating presence reduces stress and anxiety, how acceptance brings more peace and joy by aligning us with reality, and how learning to detach from negative thoughts builds emotional resilience so we can handle life's challenges better. And they even mention Oprah Winfrey, who credits the power of now with helping her stay grounded despite all the pressures of her career. That says a lot.
Absolutely. It sounds like this isn't just some abstract philosophy. It's got practical tools that can really improve our lives. So, listener, if you're new to all this, what are some concrete steps you can take today to start living more in the now? The guide has a great final thoughts section with some practical advice.
It does. And these are all things you can start doing right away. First, it recommends establishing a daily mindfulness practice, even if it's just 5 minutes each morning to observe your breath. Throughout the day, do quick check-ins, asking yourself, am I present right now or lost in thought? Just noticing where your attention is a powerful first step.
Yeah, just becoming aware of where your mind is at.
Exactly. Then, it suggests practicing detaching from negative thoughts. Observe them without getting caught up in their story, and label them as just thoughts, not necessarily reality.
That labeling thing seems helpful.
It can be. The third step is to actively practice accepting the present moment. When you feel stressed or resistant, ask yourself, can I accept this moment as it is? And if you need to take action, do it from a calm, centered place, not from a place of resistance.
So it's about shifting your perspective before you act.
Exactly. The guide also recommends focusing on one task at a time, giving it your full attention and avoiding multitasking, which we all know can be distracting and pull us out of the present.
So be present, even with the little things.
Yes. And finally, it suggests turning everyday activities like eating, walking, even doing dishes into opportunities for mindfulness. Engage your senses. Pay attention to the details of what you're doing.
Those are all really practical ways to start bringing the power of now into your daily life. It really reframes the book, not just as something to read, but as a way to live.
Totally. It's a guide to experiencing life more fully.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the key takeaway seems to be that life isn't happening in our memories or our worries about the future. It's happening right now, in this moment. And by being present in this moment, we can find more peace, more success, more fulfillment.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about realizing that the present moment is all we really have. And by choosing to be fully present in it, we can transform how we experience everything.
So listener, here's a final thought to ponder as you go about your day. What if you consciously focused your attention on just one present moment today? Maybe the feel of the sun on your skin, the taste of your coffee, the sounds around you. How might that small shift in awareness change your perspective, even in a subtle way? We encourage you to experiment with that today.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.